A minor car accident, a simple fender bender. It's the kind of thing that happens every single day. But what if a small crash could trigger a hidden illness and completely change someone's life forever? Well, that's exactly what happened in a landmark legal case called Page versus Smith. And it's a battle that really changed how we think about responsibility for injuries we can't even see.
So, can a fender bender really lead to a life-changing illness? Honestly, it sounds like a bit of a stretch, right? But as this case is about to show us, the legal answer is way more complex than you'd think, and it has some pretty huge implications for all of us.
Okay, so to really get why this case is so important, we have to start at the beginning, with the story. It starts with two men, a Mr. Page and a Mr. Smith, on what seemed like a totally ordinary day that would turn out to be anything but. Let's just walk through what happened here. So before the accident, Mr. Page already had a condition called ME, but the good news was it was in remission. Then, Mr. Smith is driving carelessly and causes a minor collision. And here's the absolute key detail. Mr. Page walked away without a single scratch, no physical injuries at all. But the shock of the whole event triggered a massive relapse of his ME, which is what led him to sue for psychiatric harm.
And this is where things get really complicated. The damage here wasn't a broken arm or a visible bruise. The real harm was this invisible injury, the reawakening of a dormant but serious illness.
Now, just to be clear on how severe this is, we need to know what ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, actually is. It's a really debilitating long-term illness. The main symptom is this profound, overwhelming fatigue. We're talking about a level of exhaustion that no amount of rest or sleep can fix, on top of a bunch of other serious problems.
And for Mr. Page, the stakes could not have been higher. This relapse wasn't just a small setback for him. His condition became chronic and permanent. The shock from that one minor accident essentially meant he could never work again. So this lawsuit wasn't just about a car crash. It was about losing his entire career and his future.
So, how on earth does the law even begin to handle a situation like this? Well, it all boils down to one critical legal concept: foreseeability.
Let's put ourselves in the judge's seat for a second. The big question you have to answer is this. When Mr. Smith was driving carelessly, could he have reasonably predicted, could he have foreseen that his actions might cause not just a dented car, but a severe, permanent psychiatric illness in the other driver?
Foreseeability is a huge deal in negligence law. Basically, it says you're only responsible for the kinds of harm you could reasonably expect your actions might cause. If the harm is just totally bizarre and out of left field, something no one could have guessed, the law says, nope, you're not on the hook for that.
And this brings us right to the heart of the legal fight. On one side, you have the defendant, Mr. Smith, arguing that this specific outcome, a severe psychiatric illness from a minor crash, was completely unforeseeable. But on the other side, the plaintiff, Mr. Page, argued that, look, if you drive negligently, it's always foreseeable that you might cause some kind of personal injury. And his point was that the law shouldn't really care if it's a broken bone or a broken mind.
This case was so tricky it went all the way to the highest court in the UK at the time, the House of Lords, and their decision was going to set a huge precedent no matter which way they went. And the court delivered its verdict. They sided with Mr. Page. The defendant, Mr. Smith, was found liable for the full extent of the psychiatric harm he had caused.
And the reasoning is all packed into this one key sentence from Lord Lloyd's judgment. He basically argued that because some kind of physical injury was foreseeable from the car crash, that's all that mattered. You didn't need a separate test for psychiatric injury. In other words, if your carelessness makes any kind of personal injury predictable, you're on the hook for all the consequences, physical or mental.
And this ruling did way more than just settle a dispute between two people. It actually established a fundamental legal principle that we now call the primary victim rule.
So the court labeled Mr. Page a primary victim. What does that even mean? Well, a primary victim is someone who is right there, directly involved in the dangerous event. They were inside the zone of potential physical danger, even if they didn't end up getting physically hurt.
This created a really important split in the law. For primary victims like Mr. Page, who are in that danger zone, all they have to do is prove that any physical injury was foreseeable. But the rules are much, much tougher for secondary victims. Think of a bystander on the sidewalk who just witnesses the accident. Since they weren't in physical danger themselves, they have to prove that psychiatric injury specifically was foreseeable, which is a much higher bar to clear.
This whole decision is really a modern version of a very old legal idea called the eggshell skull rule. It's a simple but really powerful concept. You have to take your victim as you find them. So if you hit someone who, and you don't know this, has an unusually thin skull, you're responsible for the full catastrophic result, not just for the harm a normal person would have suffered. The court applied that same principle here to Mr. Page's pre-existing psychological vulnerability.
So what's the big legacy of this case? It's this. For anyone who is directly involved in a dangerous situation, a primary victim, the law doesn't separate physical and mental harm. If your negligence creates a foreseeable risk of any personal injury, you become responsible for all of the consequences that follow, whether they're seen or unseen.
And this leaves us with a final, really challenging thought. The ruling in Page v. Smith is great because it protects people with hidden vulnerabilities, but it also really expands what we're responsible for when it comes to each other. It really makes you wonder, if we are all responsible for the unseen frailties of others, where exactly does that responsibility end?